Hello, everybody. As I posted in the chat box, please do me a favor, and when you log on, go ahead and type something in there so that I know who's in, and I can make sure I give credit to everybody who's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if you didn't see my remind, I already posted the challenge link for the Kahoot. You can play it as many times as you want between now and noon tomorrow. And so for the next 24 hours, and at noon tomorrow, it will go off and your test will go up. So I recommend that you play as many times as you possibly can. Just more practice with the questions, the better you're going to do. I've graded most of your quizzes. There's only a few left, and I'll finish grading those as soon as we're done with this review video. But something that I'm noticing is that we might not be taking very thorough notes. So starting next week, I'm not going to do it this week, but since we only have after today one more day, because if you weren't clear on the schedule, Thursday is a teacher work day, so I won't be posting any work for Thursday. Friday is a holiday, so I won't be posting any work, and Monday is also a teacher work day, so I won't post any work for those days. But starting next Tuesday, whenever we start the next unit, I'm going to have you post pictures or copies or something of your notes. So if you are typing your notes as you watch the notes videos, then you can just upload that. You can copy and paste it into the text submission box for the notes whenever we do those. Or if you are like handwriting your notes, which is what I honestly still do, upload the picture. Just take a picture of each page, and you don't have to upload them separately. You can upload them all for like that day's worth of notes or whatever. So like I said, so we'll start working on that when we start Unit 6 next week. So you don't feel like you need to go back, and I'm not going to open it up for anyone to go back and redo it for this week, since your last day of notes was yesterday anyway. But the quizzes overall, I mean, if you're taking good notes and realistically your notes are in front of you, you should be able to, it should be a clear back and forth. If you're trying to put the question into Google and then read Google for answers, what I'm seeing is one, people running out of time, because that takes a lot of time to do and you won't finish. So you're going to end up with a worse grade than if you would just put in your answer. And two, people are putting in incorrect information just because it pops up on Google. So they're getting zeros. So don't do that. I don't encourage that. It's just gonna, hurt yourself in the long run. That's not what we want. This should just be help. If anything, you should be making better quiz grades now than when you did in class, since now they're basically all open note. But if you are doing, even equal, exactly. How do you fail a quiz when we have notes? These are great questions. I was wondering the same thing as I was grading them and seeing that people had run out of time, but that the questions they had answered were very Google answers. So that's really what it comes down to. Don't try to do anything like that. Just, you've got your notes in front of you. If you're taking good notes, then, and which everyone should be taking good notes, then if anything, you should be doing better now than before. So, and if you're having trouble with the quizzes, or if you don't understand what a question's asking, you can always message me while you're taking your quiz, and that will help. Okay, so I'm going to be going through your study guide for this Unit 5, and also I'll go through through the short answer questions, and then I'll go over the matching names. If there's someone that you maybe couldn't find in your notes, maybe you missed them when I was talking about them in a video, this will be a quick rundown of everyone. So if you've got your study guide, you can like type in descriptions as we go through this, or you can just write it down, up to you. But this video will stay up. So after this is over, it will still be up for you to review, but I will remove the video tomorrow at noon when the test goes live. So make sure that if there's something that you need between now and 24 hours from now when it's time to take your test, that you go ahead and get it, whether it be from this video or the Kahoot or whatever. Okay, so as you should have seen on your study guide, you have 3 short answer questions to choose from, and I'm not going to do it like last time where I basically just like gave you all 3 questions and let you pick. This time I'm going to pick, and it's going to be 2 questions. You're not going to only answer 1, you're going to answer 2, and that's because it's basically open note, right? So you have no reason to not be able to honestly answer all 3 of these with no problem. So instead of the short answer portion normally being 10 points, now it will be 20 points, 10 points for each question. So I'll go through those 3 here. The first question, honestly, I think all 3 of these are easy, and you guys probably do. But the first question is to choose an event from the Civil Rights Movement and explain the details surrounding it, including cause and effects. So you could do anything. You could do the Little Rock 9 integration, the Montgomery bus boycott, the Greensboro 4 sit-in, the Freedom Rides, the Birmingham campaign, the Martin Luther King's assassination, anything that we talked about pertaining to the Civil Rights Movement. It doesn't necessarily have to be a protest. It could be any of those things. You're going to have the same amount of multiple choice. We just won't have like, how there's normally like an extra portion to the test, whether it be like, political cartoon or a map or something. Now you're just going to have 2 short answer questions. So like I said, you can do any of those things, and just pick whichever one event. Remember, you don't even have to do 3. You just have to pick one event and be able to explain it in its entirety. So test at a Woolworths. Like, okay, yeah, you've given me a few pieces of information in there, but like, that is not worth 10 points. I'm going to give you 1 point for that because that's lazy and that stinks. I want to see a full detailed explanation that's 10-point worthy. So you should be giving me cause. So if you're talking about Greensboro 4, then you should talk about the segregation in downtown businesses in Greensboro. Then you want to give me details. It was in 1960. It involved 4 students from A&T. After those 4 students from other colleges began to join, it was held through the summer by students from Dudley. And then finally, it ended when downtown businesses agreed to integrate in Greensboro. So that would be the effect. And another effect would be and sparked the sit-in movement, which eventually led to the creation of SNCC, which is one of the largest civil rights groups. So that would be all that information that I just said. That would be a full answer for this question when talking about the Greensboro 4. But you don't have to do the Greensboro 4. You could do Selma, since you watched the Eyes on the Prize video and you probably have a lot of it in your mind. Or Black Panthers, if you've read a lot about them. Or if you want to talk about the March on Washington. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you feel the most comfortable writing about, then just pick which one. But it has to be something that has to do with the civil rights movement. It doesn't have to be a protest. Just make sure you're picking something that you can give me a full explanation on. If all of the information that you give me can be summed up in like 1 or 2 question or 1 or 2 sentences, and you're probably not giving me enough. Look back at it and think, is this worth 10 points? The second question, let me look at it here. The second question is about Vietnam. So it says, identify and describe 3 effects of the Vietnam War and how they impacted society overall. So there are 3 categories here. These are the things that you should say would be your 3 effects, that it affected us politically, culturally, and economically. And then you just explain what all of those things mean. So politically, the Vietnam War, because of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, we gave so much more power to the president. It hurt LBJ's ability to run for another term and caused him to not seek re-election. And Nixon, it helped Nixon get elected on his promise of getting us out of the war. And it also reflected poorly on Nixon's presidency when it came out that he had lied, resulting in repealing the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution after the bombing of Cambodia. So that would be a full explanation of how it affected us politically. Then you got to give me the 2 more, culturally and economically. Culturally, the protest movement, right? The Kent State situation is a good one to mention here, but the entire anti-war movement would be our cultural change. And then economic it's going to set off a lot of, economic problems for the next few years, because we're going to have to raise taxes to pay for the war. We're going to spend $150 billion on the war, and it's going to lead to inflation. So talking through all those things explains the cultural and economic aspects. So with some planning, going through your notes, picking out the political, economic, and cultural changes brought from the war, then this should also be an easy one. It probably will end up being a little bit longer than the first one if you have to do this one. But it's still pretty straightforward information. All of this is in your notes. And then the third question is identify and describe 3 social changes in the post-war era, including causes and effects. This entire unit is social change. That's the name of the unit, is social movements. And so pretty much everything we talked about falls under this category. You could talk about conformity, social change, the birth of the rock and roll era of music. That's a social change, as long as you can explain how it's a social change in terms of like race relations and race music and things like that. The civil rights movement, of course, is an easy one. The anti-war movement is a big one. Counterculture, which I talked about, hippies and stuff, that's one. The environmental movement, the second wave of feminism, the women's liberation movement, all of those are social changes that you could talk about. You just have to give me causes of the movement, main events, and then effects. So if you were going to talk about the civil rights movement, you would say, causes being economic inequality, segregation, and, unfair, or I guess you would say like unfair voting practices in southern states. Like those are the causes. So through the movement, we saw people like Dr. King and Malcolm X emerge with different strategies through the war, or not through the war, through the movement, with, focusing on boycotts and sit-in movements. And then in the end, effects would be that we ended segregation in the United States with the Civil Rights Act. We protected voting with the Voting Rights Act. And we began to raise awareness about economic inequality through the 1970s. So that would be an easy explanation to give me on this in my mind, whether it's, the Civil Rights Movement, the women's liberation movement, and rock and roll. I would write those 3 things, and then I would bullet causes for each, big events for each, and then effects for each. And then that way, when it's time for me to do my test, if I've got those questions, I've already got that outline right in front of me, and I can just start typing them into complete sentences. That's what I recommend. That'll be the easiest way to go about it. So the first question is the only one that you have to explain 1 for. And then for questions 2 and 3, you have to give me 3 full things. So keep that in mind. Does anybody have any questions about the short answer questions, the short answer part of the test? You will have to do 2. You have to write in complete sentences in paragraph form. Do not, even if you bullet in your notes, which is fine, you need to not bullet on the test. If you bullet it, I'm not going to give you credit for it. So now it'll be 20 points for short answer since you're doing 2 of them. Any questions about short answer before I get to the matching? Okay. Cool. All right. So I'm going to move into, can we do the space race for them? That's not really a cultural change or a social movement. So no. It's okay. It's okay if you're late. I forgive you, Sam. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the matching. So if there's any of these people who you just like don't remember at all as we're going through, make a note. But all of these people realistically should be in your notes. So I think that the order I have on my screen is the same order that's on your study guide. So it should go, in alphabetical order from first name. So Alan Freed is first. He was the DJ who first used the rock and roll phrase instead of calling it race music. He started calling it rock and roll. Betty Friedan, she was a beatnik and the author of The Feminine Mystique, which was about, women working in their homes and being like wives and mothers and the damage that those like gender roles and stereotypes can do to women. Claudette Colvin is the 16-year-old from Montgomery who got arrested for refusing to give up her scene on stage the entire Montgomery bus boycott. Ella Baker founded SNCC after attending a nonviolent training meeting at Shaw University, led by people who had been involved in the Greensboro 4 sit-in. Elvis Presley, singer, right? Known as like the king of rock and roll. He danced and they wouldn't film his hips because it was scandalous for television. George Wallace, he's the governor of Alabama during the Selma marches and the Birmingham campaign. And he's the one who said, like, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That's George Wallace. Gloria Steinem was the feminist writer who went undercover as a Playboy bunny at the Playboy clubs and wrote her series called A Bunny's Tale about how women were treated at the Playboy clubs. Ho Chi Minh was the communist leader of North Vietnam and the Communist Party there. Jack Ruby, he assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald because, well, we don't really know why, but we can assume it's because either he wanted revenge because he thought Lee Harvey Oswald killed the president, or he was in on someone killing the president and wanted to kill Lee Harvey Oswald before he could, run his mouth. But either way, we know Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald because it was on camera. So that we don't have a question about. James Meredith was the student who graduated from Ole Miss, the first Black student to go to Ole Miss. And after Ole Miss, he went to Columbia and got his law degree, where he became a lawyer for the NAACP. And eventually he will get involved with the Black Power movement and have his own March Against Fear, and where he was staging a march through Mississippi, and he was assassinated and killed during that march. John Connally was the governor of Texas who was in the car with Kennedy when Kennedy was killed, and John Connally was also shot when Kennedy was shot, but John Connally lived. John Glenn is an astronaut and the first man to orbit the Earth. Lee Harvey Oswald, we know, killed maybe JFK, but conflicting reports, but nevertheless, that is who the Warren Commission ruled killed Kennedy. Malcolm X, civil rights leader. His tagline was "by any means necessary." So he was a symbol of Black nationalism and Black, the younger generation that was considered to be more militant than the nonviolent Christian side of the movement. And he was a member of the Nation of Islam until he left them. I think he left them in 1964. Martin Luther King Jr., founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, leader during the Civil Rights Movement, assassinated in 1968. Ngo Dinh Diem was the leader of South Vietnam that was U.S. and our allies backed during the Vietnam War. Phyllis Schlafly was the woman who was against the Equal Rights Movement, and she's the one that wore that big Stop the ERA, stop sign thing on her chest. That was the name of the campaign, was Stop the ERA. And STOP stood for something. I just don't remember what it stood for, but it was STOP. It stood for something. It was an acronym. So she was against women's liberation. Rachel Carson was the environmental writer who wrote Silent Spring to kick off the environmental movement. And Silent Spring was about the effects of pesticides on the bird population, and then in general how humans are affecting the planet and how that affects animal life. Ralph Abernathy worked with Martin Luther King Jr. and he was the co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and he was its leader after Dr. King's death. Richard Nixon We talked about Nixon several points this unit, but primarily his involvement in Vietnam is mostly what we talked about him a little bit in at the end of Unit 4. Remember when he first ran for president, when he was Eisenhower's vice president. In this unit, we pretty much just talked about him with Vietnam and Cambodia and the anti-war movement. In the next unit, we'll talk about his domestic policy. And then we'll talk about Watergate, obviously. But as far as this unit goes, you should think of, when you think of Nixon, you should think of he bombed Cambodia and lied about it on television. I didn't know Cambodia was bombed. Wow, I would have thought that's something you definitely would have known. Yes, your country. These were your people. All of Indochina, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. There were, I think, the most amount of bombs were actually dropped in Laos because they thought that was it was called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Yeah, Laos got the most amount of bombs, and it was being bombed from the beginning. Cambodia wasn't until the end. So yes, those are your people, Layla. I'm glad you know that now. Who did I just did Ralph Abernathy, and I just did Richard Nixon. Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael was a member of SNCC. He was the president of SNCC for a while, not the founder. He was just the president of SNCC in its later years. And he's also the person who coined the phrase Black Power. So we would consider him to be the start of the Black Power movement. Viola Liuzzo, she was the only white woman to be killed during the Civil Rights Movement. She was the woman who was driving back people who had participated in the Selma March from Selma to Montgomery. She was driving people back to the airport when she was ran off the road by the Klan and shot and killed. William Kelly Jr., he was the American lieutenant in the Army who, because of his PTSD, ordered an entire village of civilians to be executed. And so he committed a war crime because of his, mental illness related to trauma. And then William Westmoreland, last one on the list, he was the commander of American troops in Vietnam, our leader during the Vietnam War. So anybody that you're confused about, like I said, should be in your notes. Google should help, but this video will stay up. So if there's someone that you missed, you should be able to go back. Yes, I am going to save this live. So if you need to go back and rewind, like if you missed me say John Glenn or something, you can just rewind and go back, since these are in alphabetical order. Are there any other questions about anything? Otherwise, that's all I have. Also, don't forget that we're changing due dates now. So the work that was listed for yesterday, what university did Meredith graduate from? Ole Miss, Mississippi University. The same school that, if you've seen The Blind Side, same school Michael Orr went to. Thought Viola was killed during Freedom Summer. No. The guys killed during Freedom. It was the 3 men killed in the Freedom Summer. And they were also killed by the Klan. So I could see how it's confusing. But they had come from the North to volunteer to get people registered to vote. And they were killed during the Freedom Summer. So it was the 3 men. Viola was killed in Montgomery. So what was I just saying though? Oh, our dates. Our due dates. So make sure that you're paying attention to the due dates. They're always due at basically class time the next day. So the assignments that I posted for yesterday, the one where you had to read all the documents from the women's movement, those were due today at 11:45. So if you missed them being uploaded, then you should make sure that you still get them in, because of course you can turn them in late. I've set it up to where you can turn in anything late, no matter how long time has passed, because I don't want to penalize anybody because they missed an assignment during all of this mess. So I'll keep taking late stuff, but I will take points off. So make sure you're turning your stuff in as quickly as you can get it done. And then today's work, All there is the study guide and the Kahoot and this review. So you don't have anything to turn in. But the test tomorrow will go live at noon. It is due before midnight. So you do actually have to get your test done tomorrow. Because I'm not making it due at like class time on Thursday because you don't have any work Thursday. So enjoy your little mini break from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. But we'll go back to our regularly scheduled program on Tuesday, and those assignments will be due, Wednesday at 11:45, and so on and so on. What area would your focus be on the test? I mean, same as usual. The test is really at the root no different. Know all your matching. I've given you the matching list that's on your study guide. Be able to fully answer all three of those social or the short answer questions. If I was you, I would, have notes of what I would want to say for each one. That way, no matter which one I pick, you have your answers there in your mind and on your paper ready to roll. And then take the Kahoot as many times as you possibly can. When you take it, you do have to do the Kahoot at least one time. So make sure that you use your name as the Kahoot name. Because I need to make sure I give credit for everybody who did it. But in addition to that, if you want to take it more than one time, then the second time you take it, just put a number after your name. So I know that that's your second attempt. So like Steve's, I would make that my thing the first time. And then if I decided to take it more times, I'd make it Steve's 2, Steve's 3, Steve's 4. That way I'm not getting confused. And I know who's taking the Kahoot and how many times they're taking it. So as you're doing the Kahoot or any other study or review, of course, let me know if you have questions, but please make sure you're studying for your test. And if I was you, I would go back through the rest of the unit and look at any work that I may or may not have finished and make sure it's all uploaded. And then, like I said, I'll have all of your quizzes done, being graded within the next probably hour or so. They'll be finished. If I've already graded your quiz, it is up there that you can see. If I was you, I would definitely go back and look at the questions and the answers, because you definitely shouldn't get anything wrong twice. And a lot of the questions are overlap. A lot of the questions I put on the quiz are also on the test. Are you still taking those work at home extra credit photos? I am. If you want to take a work from home extra credit picture, you can send it to me, email, text, remind, or you can go back to the old work from home thread from last week's module. I think it was last week's module, or maybe it was the week before, and upload it there. But if you do that, text me and tell me that you did, just so I can make sure to go back and look at it and get your picture off. All right. Adios. Good luck on studying for your test, and I will talk to you sometime next week.